and welcome to the Love How Deep podcast with Brian and Heather Mayer. Our purpose is to equip married couples like you with resources that rely on the transformative power of God's Word to strengthen your relationship.
Welcome back to another episode of our podcast, Love How Deep, and I am actually flying solo today. I don't have my partner in crime, my wife Heather, here today, and it's kind of ironic because in our previous episode, we talked about being busy and how to kind of carve out time as much as you can. And so we are in one of those little mini seasons of being busy right now. And so just thought it would be best to keep the ball rolling, to keep the train going down the track. And so with that, had a discussion with Heather and said, hey, would it be okay if I went ahead and did an episode on my own? And she reluctantly agreed. And I don't like it. I would rather her be here with me, but we definitely want to continue to bring you great content. And I even told her that, at some points, I think it'd be great if she did some solo episodes as well. And so that way she wouldn't have me interrupting her and in her ear and changing what she's trying to say and all that good stuff. But anyway, I am excited to be here with you. I thank you for joining me today, and I think we're going to have I think this is going to be a good topic. What we're going to be talking about today is all about humility and being humble in your marriage. And I think a lot of times it's not that we are purposefully not being humble or that we are intentionally, trying to be selfish, but it's just really in our nature. I mean, it's in our nature as human beings. It's kind of how we were born. That's really what we fight against. And if you're a Christian, we know a lot that we've been born with a sin nature, is what we call it. And the only way around that is to come to terms with that and give our lives to Christ. And, not that sin will go away, but the burden that sin puts on us has been lifted, and that we have eternal life and that we can spend an everlasting life with God because of that. And so, again, it doesn't mean that sin goes away. It doesn't mean that our selfishness goes away. It just means we have a way to deal with it better. We're forgiven. And again, the burden of that is lifted off of us. So, and I think sometimes that makes it a little bit easier to not be selfish too, to know that that's the case. And so, again, very important topic here. Like I said, lots of reasons that it happens, but I still think no matter why it happens, it's still very important to talk about. And I've got I don't know if you call it a key verse or a memory verse that would be very important with this, and it's out of Philippians chapter 2, verses 3 and 4, and it says, "Do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit. Rather, in humility, value others above yourselves, not looking to your own interests, but each of you to the interest of others." And so the dictionary definition of humility is simply by taking a modest view of yourself, but it's also being free from pride and arrogance. And Heather she's talked a little bit to me about this one, that, when she's had some unforgiveness in her life over some things that have been done to her in her past, she recognizes and realizes that some of that is a result of pride. It's like, no, I don't want to forgive. I don't feel like this person deserves that. And so, in sort of an indirect, it's not purposeful, but it really does come out to be that we've got pride and we've got some arrogance, like, hey, I'm better than you and I'm not going to forgive you. I've not done something as bad as you have, and so you don't deserve forgiveness. So, but really, again, I think especially here in the United States, if you're listening here, you know that we are in a society that values like independence and values striving and always pushing forward, and sometimes at the cost of our families and our friends and other things that are important to us. It's always about pushing forward. And I think in other countries, to some degree, that's the case. I think in a lot of countries, they value family. They value doing things for other people a little bit more than they do here. So this might be a message more for the people here in the United States, but if you're listening somewhere else, I'm sure that this happens as well. And really, humility, it can be confused. A lot of times we think, oh, am I just supposed to think less of myself? And what I like to say is, no, humility is more about thinking about myself less, not so much thinking less of myself. So again, I want to put myself on kind of an equal footing with everybody else in my life. But the fact is, I want to try to think about them a little bit more with everything that I do. And we have the perfect model for what humility looks like, and that's in Jesus. And he came as a little baby. And so, how much more humble can you be to come as a baby? And I often think about, was he up in heaven sitting at the right hand of God, and they were having a conversation about him coming to earth? And I wonder if, and I'm sure this didn't happen, but if it were me, I might be like, hey, God, can I come as an adult? I want to be fully independent. I want to be able to do my own thing. And God sitting there saying, no, son, you're going to come as a newborn baby. You're going to be helpless. You're going to need others. You're going to go through a process of learning and understanding about the world, just like any other human being would. And the purpose and the point of that is that, I want to give you, and I'm talking as if I'm God to Jesus here. I want to give those that are on earth, the humans that I've created, the opportunity to be able to see you from birth to death, and to see everything that you've experienced, and to see what it's like to, again, go through all of life's mountaintop experiences, valley situations, stresses, pain, discomfort, and even obviously the torture and the terrible death that he went through. He wanted us all to see that. So he really does model, I think, what it is to be humble. I love this passage in 1 Corinthians chapter 1, verse 29, where it says that God chose the lowly things of this world and the despised things and the things that are not, to nullify the things that are, so that no one may boast before him. So again, going back to that example I just talked about, again, for me, it would be like, well, God, I want to present my best self. I want to show the world the best parts of me. And again, God was like, no, I want everyone to be able to see everything about you. And so that's why I'm choosing you to enter the world as a baby. And I think this also kind of reminds me too of, so Heather and I are doing this Love How Deep ministry, and we've got all sorts of things going with it. We're doing the podcast. We've built online courses. We've got a marriage conference, actually, that I'm super excited that we are piloting with our own church here in just a few days from this recording. We've got a newsletter. We've got all kinds of free resources on our website. We've got a blog. And really, Heather and I just look at each other like we're just average people. We're not pastors that pastor, a 25,000 member church in, wherever. And, we're not theologians. We don't have theological degrees, that type of thing. We're just average people that have a testimony. And I used to think that the only people that had great testimonies were maybe those that were, almost on death's doorstep because of drugs or, just terrible, awful lifestyles and that type of thing. And so I used to think I didn't have much of a testimony, but the older that I get and the more that I look back on it, yes, I have a testimony just like everyone else. And really, God brought me just from, again, humble beginnings, just this average person now doing this. I'm just super amazed, and I don't think God would have it any other way. For sure. So, and one other thing too that I want to say is that if you think about humility and you think, well, I don't want to really practice that. Isn't that, isn't that weakness? And God says, no, it's not. And he actually talks about, I don't have the passage handy, but he talks about how the honor for humility, according to him, is honor. So when you're humble, he will honor that. He will bless that. I do believe he will do that for you here while you're on earth, but also you will have many jewels in your crown in heaven because of that. So one of the things too I wanted to mention, back in sort of biblical times, I almost hate using that phrase. It sounds kind of silly, but back in the olden days, you know how we used to always say that, there was a concept called foot washing, and it was really the ultimate practice of humility. And believe it or not, Jesus actually showed this humility. And back in the day, foot washing was done as sort of a hospitality thing in Palestinian homes. And it was usually done for guests who wore sandals, walked on dusty roads, and it was typically done by a servant of the house or even the wife of the host. So men typically would never be caught washing somebody's feet. Well, as we know with Jesus, he typically turns things upside down, and before he went to the cross the night before at the Last Supper, he actually asked, or really commanded, all of his disciples that he was going to wash their feet. And really, again, just another awesome symbol of humility. And I would just, as we're talking through, again, I would implore you as a married couple, again, work on ways to show humility. I mean, what that might look like might look different to different people, but for me, maybe it's a situation where Heather wants to do something, wants to go somewhere, wants to go to a certain restaurant, and maybe internally, I don't know that I really want to do that, but you know what, I'm going to show some humility and let her decide what we're going to do. And then I think to follow up with that, what we have to make sure of, which is probably another episode here, is that to make sure that I have a good attitude. Once I've made the decision that I'm going to be humble, I'm going to do this, then I have to get rid of the resentment, the bitterness. And I see that all so often, and I'm guilty of it myself, where I might say, yeah, sure, I'll do it, and then just act like a pill for the rest of the day because of it. And that's not right either. And I've kind of learned and decided over my life that if I'm going to make a decision to do something, then it's no longer on the other person to have to deal with my attitude, my mood. It's up to me to straighten this out. And if I don't say no, then that's all about probably bad boundaries that I'm setting. Again, probably another episode that we'll get into at some point too. But anyway, back to Jesus. So if you want to read more about this in John chapter 13, verses 1 through 15, it talks a lot about the foot washing. But it was just before the Passover festival, and Jesus knew that the hour had come for him to leave this world and go to the Father. Having loved his own who were in the world, he loved them to the end. The evening meal was in progress, and the devil had already prompted Judas, the son of Simon Iscariot, to betray Jesus. Jesus knew that the Father had put all things under his power, and that he had come from God and was returning to God. So he got up from the meal, took off his outer clothing, and wrapped a towel around his waist. After that, he poured water into a basin and began to wash his disciples' feet, drying them with the towel that was wrapped around him. He came to Simon Peter, who said to him, "Lord, are you going to wash my feet?" Jesus replied, "You do not realize what I'm doing, but later you will understand." "No," said Peter, "you shall never wash my feet." Jesus answered, "Unless I wash you, you have no part with me." "Then, Lord," Simon Peter replied, not just my feet, but my hands and my head as well." And Jesus answered and said, "Those who have had a bath need only to wash their feet. Their whole body is clean, and you are clean, though not every one of you." For he knew who was going to betray him, and that was why he said not everyone was clean. So when he had finished washing their feet, he put on his clothes and returned to his place. "Do you understand what I've done for you?" he asked them. "You call me teacher and Lord, and rightly so, for that is what I am. Now that I, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you also should wash one another's feet. I've set an example that you should do as I have done for you." And I just love that because obviously, number one, Jesus being a male, threw the culture sort of out the window. And he really wanted everyone to understand that, hey, everyone can do this. And then he ultimately said, now that I've shown you what to do, I want you to do this for others. I want you to do this for each other. And, I'll be honest. I mean, obviously, Heather and I, when we get home from work, it's not a practice that we do regularly or even really at all. We did do it once when we were training a group of marriage mentors, and we really thought this was an important thing to show the mentors so that they could show their couples and even maybe have them in a session do it. And so she and I did this, and I think honestly, in all the years that we've been married, I think that's probably the first time we've really washed each other's feet. So it was done as part of showing others, but I still think it was a great exercise. And I even, many years before, I went to something called a breakthrough weekend at the church that we attended in Florida. It was a weekend event, and I had somebody wash my feet there, and it was just an experience I'll never forget. And I think, again, what Jesus is talking about here is, it's the thing that you're doing that's important. It's getting the feet clean, but it's really what does it symbolize? And it symbolizes, again, just washing someone from their sins. And that's sort of the point of this whole thing, is to say that you don't have to do anything. It's not on you to have to, kind of clean up the sin. It's on me to help you do this. And so I think a lot of times when we don't know Jesus and we're contemplating this Christian life or attending church, we think a lot, well, I've got to get myself cleaned up. I've got to start living right. I've got to start making better decisions. Then I can go to church. Then I'll be more accepted. And no, that's not the point. What he's actually saying is, no, come to me and I will wash you. I will take care of you. And I think the reason that we struggle with that is because we have difficulty with other human beings. Other human beings might make it so that when we walk into the church with our tattoos or holes in our jeans or a lifestyle that might not be appropriate, or maybe we have alcohol in our breath, that, we come into contact with other human beings, we might be rejected or seen as less than. And so that kind of messes things up, but that's not what Jesus says. He says that, I want all of you to come to me, no matter what situation you're in, and I will help get things right for you. So I would encourage you, after you listen to this episode, maybe get a little tub, a small tub, get a couple of bottles of water, get a couple of towels, and practice this foot washing. It's just a sign of humility. And it really didn't talk about this, but you think about when you're washing someone's feet, you are in a very vulnerable position. You're actually bending down. You've got your head down. I mean, you could be attacked. You could be killed for doing something like this. You're not in a very defensive position. You're sort of laying yourself down and saying, I'm dropping my guard, I'm dropping my walls, and I'm going to take care of you just for a moment. So it's a very humbling experience. I think it would be one that the two of you would remember for a lifetime. And then once you do that, as what Jesus said, model it for others, tell others about your experience, and even maybe show it to them, do it for them. I think it'll be an experience that won't be forgotten. And we do this. So this session on humility that I'm talking about, Heather and I have a marriage conference that we have put together, and that we go out to different churches and we do this marriage conference, and it's got 9 sessions, and one of the sessions is on humility because it's extremely important. And we're super excited. Like I mentioned before, we're actually piloting this marriage conference with our church. Just doing a real small, intimate gathering. And then our hope and our plan is to take it to our church at some point here in the next few months as a whole. And then from there, we really want to expand out. And so if you're listening to this and you attend church, or even if you're on church staff, I would highly consider you reaching out to us. You can either go to lovehowdeep.com, and there's a page for our conference there, or feel free to email Heather or myself. You can email me at brian@lovehowdeep.com or heather@lovehowdeep.com, and let us know. And we'd love to talk to you about our marriage conference and what we can bring. And I think you would be super excited about having your couples go through this, or having your church go through this. So don't forget about that. One of the things that we do during the humility portion is we take a look back. It's kind of a silly look back into the 1950s and 1960s. And it's crazy, some of the advertisements and how women especially were portrayed back then. And for the most part, I think women accepted it and were okay with it and weren't offended by it. But it's amazing how, like, there was one advertisement that I saw where the man is actually spanking his wife because she didn't taste test his coffee before she served it to him. And that's what the advertisement's showing. And it almost seems like the wife's actually kind of enjoying this. And so you kind of see how far we've come. It's like, yeah, that's probably not acceptable at this point. And again, we can get into the whole discussion about submission. And like, I think it's in Ephesians chapter 5 that it talks about that in the Bible. But again, I think that's very misconstrued, but we're not going to kind of deal with that at this point. But there's even one, I don't necessarily think it was an advertisement. I think it's just like a funny thing someone put together, but this guy is peeking his head around the door, kind of coming home from work, and she's cooking dinner, and he says something like, "Wow, I see you've got a lot done today. Was the internet down?" And again, not an extremely humble way of speaking to your wife. I'll just go on record to say, hey, men, if you listening to that, that's probably not the best way to be humble. The best way to be humble is to thank your wife for, wow, thank you for what you're doing. Thank you for cooking this meal. Thank you for taking care of the things in this home. And even if your wife works outside the home, give her thanks for what she's doing when it comes to that. Like, a lot of times people will tell me, well, that's just what they're supposed to be doing. That's, why should I thank something that is supposed to be done, or that's their job? No, don't look at it like that. Be humble, be thankful. I try my best. I'm not perfect, but whenever my wife makes dinner, whenever Heather makes dinner, which she typically does, 99.9% of the time she cooks our dinners. The other 0.1%, I'm doing it, which I don't even know if I can even remember doing it. It's been a while, but I'll say thank you for doing that. I don't look at it like, well, this is her job. This is what she's supposed to do. No, as much as I can, I try to remember to thank her. And so just remember that, to always be humble. And, I would ask you right now, what are some practical ways that you can show humility to your spouse? I want you to just kind of think about that for a minute as we're talking. Maybe just think of one thing that you can do. And maybe it's as soon as we're done with this episode, which we'll wrap up here in just a moment, think about something that you can do in a practical way to show your appreciation. It might be in words or it might be in deed. And so, again, just remember that model that Jesus had for us. I know when Heather and I, when we lived in Florida, the company that I worked for, I was working in the corporate world, and they had made the decision to relocate and move offices, and so asked me and others to move to Richmond, Virginia, if we wanted to maintain our same job. And so at that point, Heather actually was wrapping up she was getting her bachelor's degree for teaching, and she had a great opportunity at a school she was at. The principal loved her, and he said basically, you know what, she had done a long-term sub position and just was fantastic. And he said, you know what, you've got a job next year if you want it. And man, that really gave me pause. That I think both of us had to think about humility in that moment, to think about, okay, one of us is going to have to humble ourselves here. And I was actually, when that happened, I was certainly willing to potentially do that. But what we talked about was, I made more money than she did. And I think we looked at it from a little bit more of a logical standpoint, maybe not as much of a spiritual, supernatural kind of standpoint, although we did pray about it. But we just felt like the city that we were moving to in Virginia, which is where we are now in Richmond, had a little bit more of an opportunity. So that's really what drove what we decided to do. So we decided to move here. She forego, I don't even know. That's not a word. She decided that she was going to humble herself and follow me. And it took a little bit. It was during the time when we were having, some economic, crises, if you will, here in the United States. And so getting a job was pretty difficult at that point. But it took a little bit, but she finally did get a job. And now she's at a place that she absolutely loves and has been there for years. So it definitely all worked out. And we give the credit to God certainly for that. But that was probably a pretty big example of being humble. I'm not saying that you necessarily have to do that when you get off the podcast episode, but it might be even just something small. So I think that is probably everything I wanted to share about humility. It's a very important concept in our relationship. So certainly practice it as much as you can. And I hope you've enjoyed this episode. I know Heather has not been here, and I'm going to get her back on the podcast here, hopefully within the next episode or two. But again, one of those times in our lives when we've just got a lot of busyness going on, and I'm sure you do as well. And I am so honored and thankful that you have decided to listen. It means so much. You just have no idea how appreciative we both are. And if you want to see our show notes, if you want to see anything that we talked about, feel free to go to lovehowdeep.com/10. That's just simply the number 10, and you will have all the show notes about humility. And then one final thing too, I would recommend highly to go to lovehowdeep.com /newsletter, sign up for our newsletter, and you will get everything that we are doing. You will stay in touch, and I think it will bless your life. All right, with that, I will go ahead and sign off, and I will see you all next time. Take care.